It was the late 1970s in Long Island, New York, a place known for its quiet suburban charm. The streets were lined with maple trees, the lawns were neatly trimmed, and families enjoyed the sense of peace that came with living far from the chaos of the city. But inside one particular house, a young family was about to experience the kind of horror that would shatter their sense of safety forever. The family had only recently moved into the home. It seemed perfect for them. A spacious two-story house, enough room for their 2 children, and a backyard where they dreamed of summer barbecues. At first, everything felt normal, even blissful. But within weeks, the mother began noticing strange, unexplainable events. It started small. One evening, as she prepared dinner, a picture frame fell from the wall and smashed against the floor. She checked the wall and the hook, it was secure. There was no draft, no vibration, no reason for it to fall. Shrugging it off, she cleaned up the glass and went about her evening. But later that night, she heard the unmistakable sound of knocking 3 deliberate raps coming from inside the walls. When she told her husband, he reassured her it was probably just the house settling. But the disturbances didn't stop. Over the next few nights, the knocks grew louder, echoing through the hallways at odd hours. The children began to complain of whispers in their room, voices that seemed to come from the dark corners where no one stood. One night, the youngest child woke screaming, claiming that a shadowy figure had stood at the foot of his bed, staring at him silently before vanishing. The mother's unease deepened when she began to notice cold spots in the house. Even in the middle of summer, the living room would suddenly drop to an icy temperature, chilling anyone who entered. Sometimes she caught movement from the corner of her eye, shadows darting across the room, but when she turned, nothing was there. Then came the first physical attack. One evening, the parents heard their son scream in terror. They rushed into his room and found him trembling, pointing toward the closet. Across his back were 3 long red scratches as if made by claws. The marks were fresh, glistening on his skin. No one was in the room. Fear began to grip the family. They locked the windows and doors, kept the lights on at night, and prayed for safety. But the house seemed alive, mocking them. Doors slammed shut on their own. The sound of heavy footsteps echoed on the stairs when no one was there. Objects moved across tables as if pushed by invisible hands. By now, it was clear this was no ordinary house, and they were not alone. Something had chosen them, something that wanted to make its presence known. And this was only the beginning. After the first attacks, the family desperately tried to convince themselves it was stress, imagination, or perhaps even the children playing tricks. But denial quickly gave way to terror, because the activity inside the house began to grow stronger, bolder, and far more violent. It began with small objects. A coffee mug slid across the kitchen counter, even though the surface was perfectly level. The children's toys moved on their own, dolls rotated their heads slowly as if watching the family, and a toy car rolled across the living room floor with no one touching it. At first, the parents tried to explain it away, but soon, the movements became aggressive. Chairs scraped loudly against the floor, shifting several feet as though dragged by invisible hands. One night, during dinner, an entire table shuddered violently before tipping over, crashing plates and silverware onto the floor. The father swore he felt something push it with tremendous force, yet no one was there. The children became the focus of the attacks. The youngest boy continued to wake screaming in the middle of the night. He claimed the shadow man came closer each time, standing beside his bed, breathing heavily, its glowing eyes fixed on him. The parents would rush in, but all they found was a terrified child and icy air surrounding his bed. The daughter fared no better. She began speaking of whispers that told her to get out, or they are coming. Once, she was violently shoved against her bedroom wall, leaving a bruise on her arm. Her mother saw it happen, saw her daughter fly backward without anyone near her. That was the night she broke down in tears, realizing this was not her children's imagination. Violence in the home. The house itself seemed to turn against them. Doors slammed so hard that the walls shook. Windows rattled violently in their frames, even on calm nights with no wind. The family's dog barked and growled at empty corners, its fur bristling, before running away to hide under the bed. And then came the smell. A putrid stench of rotting flesh would suddenly fill the rooms. It made the family gag, searching for the source. But there was nothing, only that foul odor which would vanish as quickly as it came. One evening, the mother entered the kitchen to find every cabinet door flung open, dishes shattered on the floor, and a message scratched into the wooden table. Leave. A house of fear. By now, sleep was nearly impossible. Every night brought new horrors, thunderous bangs, lights flickering, crucifixes twisting upside down on the walls. The father confessed he sometimes felt watched, even followed, by something unseen. Shadows danced across the hallways, though no one was walking there. The children begged their parents not to make them go to bed, crying that the thing was waiting for them in the darkness. The family began to realize the truth. They were being terrorized, hunted, by a presence that grew stronger with every passing day. The house was no longer a home. It was a prison, and the entity had only just begun to reveal its true power. The family's life had become a living nightmare. Every day brought new attacks, new terrors. But soon, it wasn't just them who noticed. The haunting began to spill beyond the walls of the house, creeping into the neighborhood, and dragging more witnesses into the horror. The neighbors notice. One late night, the neighbors across the street reported seeing the lights in the family's house flickering violently, flashing on and off in strange patterns. At first, they thought it was a power issue, but then something else caught their attention: the silhouettes. From their window, they swore they saw tall, distorted figures moving past the upstairs curtains, figures too tall and too misshapen to belong to anyone in the family. Yet when they later asked, the family revealed that everyone had been asleep at that very moment. Others in the neighborhood began whispering of hearing screams coming from the house at night, piercing, blood-curdling screams that echoed into the street. But when concerned neighbors knocked on the door to check, the family swore they hadn't made a sound. The house was gaining a reputation. Some locals crossed the street rather than walk past it. Children pointed at it in fear, saying it looked angry. The family was now not just trapped in a haunted home, they were living inside a legend that terrified their entire community. The desperate plea for help. The father, worn down and terrified, turned to the church. A local priest agreed to come to the house and bless it. The family waited anxiously, hoping that holy words and holy water might end their torment. At first, the blessing seemed to bring peace. The priest walked from room to room, sprinkling water, reciting prayers, and holding up a crucifix. The air felt lighter, calmer, until it didn't. Halfway through the ritual, the atmosphere shifted violently. The temperature plummeted. A deep rumble shook the walls, as though something inside the house was furious. Then, from the living room, a deafening crash sounded. The priest rushed in, only to see a heavy bookshelf topple over by itself, books scattering across the floor. The crucifix in his hand grew so hot, he nearly dropped it. He looked at the family, his face pale, and said only one thing: "This is no ordinary haunting. You need more help than I can give." The entity grows stronger. After the failed blessing, the activity worsened. The house seemed enraged, as if mocking the family for trying to drive it away. Crucifixes twisted upside down on the walls. The family's dog was found cowering in the basement, whining as if beaten by an invisible force. Objects hurled themselves across rooms once. A kitchen knife flew past the father's head, embedding itself into the wall. The mother began to hear a guttural voice whispering her name in the dead of night. Sometimes it called from the children's rooms, though when she rushed in, the children were fast asleep. The children themselves grew pale and withdrawn. They refused to sleep alone, clinging to their parents, begging them not to leave them even for a moment. They knew better than anyone that the entity was watching, waiting, feeding on their fear. The breaking point. The father, exhausted and desperate, confessed that he no longer felt safe in his own home. He admitted to his wife that he often had the sensation of being followed by something tall, something that breathed heavily behind him in the hallways. On more than one occasion, he swore he saw a dark figure standing at the end of the hallway, only for it to vanish when he blinked. The family was collapsing under the weight of the terror, and with the church's blessing failing, there seemed to be nowhere else to turn. But then, word of their torment began to spread beyond the neighborhood. It would not be long before two of the most famous paranormal investigators in the world would hear about their plight. Ed and Lorraine Warren, and their arrival would turn the haunting into a battle unlike anything the family had ever imagined. By now, the haunting inside the Long Island home was no longer a secret. The neighbors spoke in hushed tones, the church admitted the problem was beyond their power, and the family was on the verge of collapse. When word finally reached Ed and Lorraine Warren, the renowned demonologists, the couple agreed to investigate. Their arrival would mark a turning point in the case, because the entity in that house was about to fight back harder than ever before. The first impression: the moment Lorraine Warren stepped onto the property, her face grew pale. As a clairvoyant, she was sensitive to spiritual energies, and what she felt here was unlike most hauntings she had ever encountered. "This house," she whispered, clutching her rosary, "it's full of anger. Something very dark is inside." Ed Warren, carrying his equipment and crucifix, noticed how unnaturally still the air was. The birds, which usually filled the Long Island streets with sound, were silent around the house. It was as if nature itself avoided this place. The investigation begins. Ed and Lorraine set up cameras, audio recorders, and temperature gauges around the home. The family watched nervously, praying the Warrens could finally bring them peace. But almost immediately, the equipment began to fail. Batteries that had been fully charged drained within minutes. Cameras froze, showing only static. Tape recorders captured eerie growls, though no one had spoken. In the children's room, Lorraine froze. She described seeing a tall, shadowy figure crouched in the corner. Its eyes glowed faintly red, and it radiated pure hatred. The presence hissed in her mind, mocking her for even stepping into its domain. Ed, meanwhile, documented heavy thuds on the stairs, though no one was walking there. At one point, a crucifix he had placed on the wall was violently torn down, landing at his feet. "This is no restless spirit," Ed said grimly. "This is demonic. The entity strikes." During one of their nightly vigils, the Warrens sat with the family in the living room, reciting prayers. The house responded violently. The entire structure shook, as though struck by an earthquake. A heavy lamp levitated off a table before hurling itself across the room, narrowly missing the father. The children screamed that they saw a dark shape crawling across the ceiling, its limbs bending in unnatural directions. Lorraine gasped as she felt unseen hands grip her throat. She clawed at her neck, choking, until Ed rushed to press a crucifix against her. Only then did the invisible force release her. The mother, sobbing, begged them to stop the session, but Ed shook his head. "If we stop, it grows stronger. We must face it." The shadow in the hallway. Later that night, as Ed walked down the narrow hallway to check one of the cameras, he stopped in his tracks. Standing at the far end was the figure, a tall, distorted shadow, its eyes glowing with malevolence. For a moment, the air grew icy, and Ed could hear it breathing heavily, like a predator savoring the hunt. He gripped his crucifix, raising it high, and commanded the entity to reveal itself. In an instant, the shadow vanished, leaving behind only the stench of sulfur and rot. When Ed returned to the living room, his face was pale but determined. "It's not just a haunting," he said. "This thing wants to destroy you, and it won't stop until it's confronted head-on." The decision: after days of investigation, the Warrens concluded that this was one of the most violent cases of poltergeist activity turning demonic they had ever seen. The family, now terrified beyond belief, begged them to help drive the entity away. Lorraine promised to fight for them, though she warned the battle ahead would be dangerous. Ed contacted priests and arranged for a full exorcism. Until then, they would remain by the family's side, holding vigils, praying, and keeping the entity at bay as best they could. But everyone in that house knew one chilling truth. The demon was waiting, watching, and preparing to unleash its full fury when the confrontation began. And the most violent phase of the haunting was still to come. The Warrens had seen countless hauntings, possessions, and cursed objects in their long careers, but even they knew that the Long Island house was among the most dangerous cases they had encountered. By now, the entity had grown furious. Their prayers, their rituals, their very presence in the house, it all provoked the dark force into unleashing its full fury. What came next was nothing short of a war between light and darkness. The exorcism begins. On a cold evening, priests arrived at the house, summoned by Ed Warren. The family gathered, trembling, clutching rosaries, as holy water and crucifixes were prepared. Ed warned them, "What happens tonight will be violent, but you must not give in to fear. Faith is your only weapon." The prayers began. The Latin words of the rite echoed through the house. At first, the air grew thick, heavy, suffocating. Then came the sound scratching deep within the walls, low growls vibrating through the floorboards, as though something monstrous was trying to claw its way out of the very structure. Suddenly, a deafening bang shook the entire house. The lights flickered, and every door slammed shut at once. The children screamed as they saw a black, hulking figure crawl out of the shadows in their room. Its face was distorted, its eyes glowing red, its form twisting unnaturally as it stalked toward them. The priests raised their crucifixes, shouting the prayers louder. The figure hissed, retreating slightly, but it didn't vanish. Instead, it lashed out. The house turns against them. The walls shook violently, as if the house itself were alive and furious. Windows shattered. A mirror exploded, sending shards of glass flying across the room. One shard sliced the father's arm, drawing blood. The smell of sulfur filled the air. Objects hurled themselves across the rooms. Books, lamps, even pieces of furniture crashing violently against the walls. The dog howled in terror before fleeing into the basement, whimpering. Lorraine, her voice trembling but firm, cried out, "It's feeding on our fear, don't give it what it wants." She then described aloud what she saw with her clairvoyant gift. The entity, a grotesque, towering demon, crouched in the corner, its mouth twisted into a mocking grin. It roared, a sound so inhuman that the walls seemed to vibrate with it. The breaking point. As the prayers intensified, the demon struck back harder. One of the priests was lifted off his feet and thrown against the wall. Ed rushed to his side, helping him up, while continuing the prayer of deliverance. Lorraine suddenly screamed as invisible hands clutched her shoulders, forcing her down. She gasped for air, but Ed pressed the crucifix to her, and the grip loosened. Then, in one final, furious act, the demon revealed itself to everyone. A massive, shadowy form filled the living room, its eyes burning like coals, its voice a guttural growl. "You cannot drive me out. This is my domain." The priests did not stop. They shouted louder, commanding the demon in the name of God to leave. The crucifix glowed brightly, the prayers filled the house, and for the first time, the entity shrieked in pain. The lights burst in a blinding flash. The shadow twisted violently, thrashing against the walls, before vanishing with a roar that shook the entire neighborhood. Then silence. Aftermath. The house fell still. The air lightened. The putrid stench disappeared. For the first time in months, the family felt peace. The children cried in relief, clinging to their parents. The priests collapsed in exhaustion, whispering quiet prayers of thanks. The Warrens remained cautious. Ed warned the family that while the entity had been forced out, it might not be gone forever. "Demons don't die," he said grimly. "They wait. They linger. But your faith, your unity will protect you." In the weeks that followed, the family noticed the silence remained. No more footsteps. No more screams. No more shadows. But the trauma of what they endured haunted them deeply. Eventually, they made the difficult choice to leave the house behind. They sold it quietly and moved away, never speaking publicly about the ordeal again. Yet, rumors persisted. Some neighbors swore they still saw strange shadows in the windows late at night, long after the family was gone. Others said the land itself was cursed, and that no one who lived there would ever find peace. For Ed and Lorraine Warren, the Long Island Poltergeist case became another reminder of the eternal battle they waged: light against darkness, faith against evil. And though they left the house victorious, both admitted privately that the entity they faced there was one of the most mocking and dangerous forces they had ever encountered. Did you enjoy the story? Let us know in the comments. And if you liked it, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to The Horror Dream. Want more stories like this? Subscribe to The Horror Dream, and we'll bring you more darkness, just for you. If you enjoy a little chill down your spine, stick around, like, share, and hit that subscribe button, right here on The Horror Dream. Your support keeps us going, so stay with us. Subscribe to The Horror Dream for more spine-tingling tales.